Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your back channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the changed mix and source of a politician's income, how much that's changed since the globalists have taken over, and how much globalization has, whether by design or to some extent, perhaps inadvertently, how it's driven all politicians really into the arms of big finance and big property development. And big finance and big property developers are the main, or amongst the main pushers of mass migration and all these other things that feed into their bonanza windfall profits that this sector. If you look at sort of the profit, the relative profit for funds employed in the financial sector, it's the highest profit of all, and second is property development. So it's no secret that these two are the most profitable sectors of the economy, and they're the sector that, third comes pharmaceutical, but they're the sectors that control the political class all across the Western world. So let's just have a look at this. Now if we look at say, politicians in the 1950s, 1960s, other than the ones that may have been born into money, they typically weren't rich. Their primary source of income was their politician's salary, and it was frowned upon to arrange cozy, well-paid jobs for, say, wives and that sort of relatives and that sort of thing. Not that it didn't happen, it did, but they tended to be honorary positions that had prestige, say with a charity, but may not have carried much of a salary, that sort of thing. So really, a politician's salary was the main, if not their only, income. And we would look at, again, I was reading a history recently of an English politician, Enoch Powell, who was one of the early of the people that broke ranks with the political elite and warned about the danger of mass migration and the effect it would have on the West, and particularly Britain in this case. Now, just looking at him, he had, his weekly politician salary was X, and it wasn't a handsome salary. It was okay, but nothing fancy. He wasn't living on Easy Street or anything like that. And then he had a couple of sort of second jobs where he would, say, engage in speaking tours or things like, which again didn't pay a lot, but and there's a surviving letter where he thanked somebody who'd given him some sort of a speaking engagement because he was struggling to meet some debts, and this had assisted him in meeting those debts. So these were people that were themselves sort of middle class. They were one of the people. When they legislated things in Parliament, it affected them as much as it did the people, and they were very mindful of that. Not that they didn't take decisions that maybe not everyone agreed with, but they were concerned about the plight of the people because they were one of the people and they represented the people. And this was very, very clear just reading the histories of, you look at people like Harry Truman in the United States, or Clement Attlee, Enoch Powell I just mentioned in the United Kingdom, and other politicians such as Harold Macmillan and so on. Now, there were ones that came from a more illustrious background, and they weren't so concerned with money. But even Winston Churchill, who did come from an aristocratic background, he was constantly in debt and was having to engage in things like, he was quite a well-known author, for example, and his books did reasonably well, and there's still many of them are still for sale today. So, but a politician wasn't getting outside of their own skills and talents. In Churchill's case, for example, writing books, or as a historian as well, or their parliamentary salary. Now, they may have served on a few parliamentary committees and they got a little bit of extra money there, but nothing really serious. and they did these things to help them get by, but they did have to attend committee meetings, so they may not leave the Parliament building until midnight, given all the meetings they had to attend, for not a huge amount of extra money. Now things are radically changed. That's not the case anymore. So if you look at any Western politician today, the cost of living is such, brought about by globalization, the cost of living is such that a politician's salary is just not adequate. If you take, say, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the US, AOC, I think she gets paid something like 170,000 a year. Now, in a big city like New York or London, Sydney, LA, that sort of thing, that's not a lot of money anymore. In fact, it's all very ordinary money. So if you're going to go places and own a house in a nice area and this sort of thing, then you need additional income, and you can't get that from your parliamentary salary. And the gap between what a parliamentary salary could buy you in terms of, say, real estate 30, 40 years ago and what it can buy today is very different. Parliamentary salaries haven't really increased very much. Now we're not getting good quality politicians for the money. $170,000 to someone like fucking ARC, who's a part-time barmaid, for Christ's sakes. I mean, holy shit, $170,000 probably seems like a lot of money to someone who's maybe used to making $20,000 a year. So, paying, and a politician can't afford to live a middle-class lifestyle, in effect. If they've got a working spouse and no children, then maybe they can put something together there. But unless they've got a very safe district constituency to represent, and they can stay, like Strom Thurmond, and stay in it for like 1 million years or something. Unless they've got that, then the position in say a district that changes hands between the different political parties quite often, being a politician can have or represent quite a precarious existence. So a lot of the politicians now, whether it be Ilhan Omar or Ayanna Pressley, and many of them, they couldn't make $170,000 a year out in the competitive marketplace. No chance. Most of them would struggle, like part-time barmaids in AOC's case, or they'd work as some flunky on a hotel desk, or they'd be on the refund counter at Walmart or Kmart or something like that. That's about the level these people are at. They're not they're not people that can make the serious money outside of any system of patronage, which is what they relied on, of course, to get those gigs in Parliament. So their money just isn't enough. Now, what do? They have to find other sources of income, but they have no skills. So they're not like Winston Churchill, where they can write books and things like that, and produce a good selling or well selling, best selling history books. They haven't got. So they've got no ability, no skills, no nothing. All they've got is their parliamentary salary and the system of sleazy patronage that put them in there in the first place. Outside of that, they're going back to being a barmaid or something like that. So they've got to find another source of income. And many politicians, not all, but many politicians fall into this category. So the big money is to be had in real estate speculation, or getting prime shareholding of shares that are about to seriously skyrocket. And this is where the big financial end of town and the big property developers can come in, and do come in. So now most of the money that politicians make is through real estate speculation. And there are numerous politicians in Australia, as there are all across the Western world, who will buy some place somewhere, some ordinary place, and they'll be there's whole departments in the big banks and the big finance that are dedicated to looking after politicians. So they'll say, well, do you want to buy this house here for $1 million? Don't worry about the finance. That taken care of. $1 million, and then they introduce a cashed up Chinese buyer who only wants to launder the fucking money. They're not there to buy value and so on. Who will pay $4 million for this house that sold for $1 million only a year or so ago, and so the politician makes a windfall return, a windfall profit, but then they owe the bank or they owe the financial institution for the favour. And there are other ways of doing it. Like one politician, he had he actually was, I think, reasonably genuine, but he wasn't going places, and he got divorced, and he'd married an attractive but absolutely moronic woman, and he needed to recover from the effects of the divorce. So one of the big banks gave his moronic new wife a $500,000 a year consulting job. And they also gave him, fixed him up with various properties, investment properties, which he flipped again to cashed up Chinese buyers for serious money. So he'd made his money back very, very quickly on the effects of divorce. And today he's got to be worth 30 million plus. So the big financial in town, they certainly look after them that way. Another one is the big merchant banks that handle IPOs, that bring new share offerings to the market. They'll sell those inside IPOs, the pre IPO share sales. They'll sell those to key politicians and so on. Maybe not huge shareholdings, but they could buy 10,000, for example, 10,000 shares at $2 each. But it goes to market on the first day at $25. So the politicians, without having to commit any money themselves, the big, the financial institution takes care of all this. Then they're able to make $250,000 in a couple of days. So all these sort of things are going on, and the political class needs this because the politician's salary just isn't enough. But what it does, it creates this huge reliance on really the globalization and the globalist project, where they have to allow lots of offshore plaything, money laundering investment into the West in real estate, just so they can flip them quickly to make millions themselves. So the entire political class now, and I'd say if not all of them, certainly just about all of them, are now relying on real estate speculation and real estate property investment for the primary source of their income. And for the ones that are making millions out of it, the real estate income may represent 95% of their income. So this is how wedded they are, the political class, how wedded they are and how reliant they are on the big financial end of town, big property end of town, again, who are the prime movers in pushing the globalization project, mass migration, mass movement of illicit money, and so on. So, but this means that until the Western economies have purchasing power that represents the local people in the community or in the nation, till it represents that and is so out of kilter, that say a politician in Australia that gets paid $170,000 a year, plus they're members of a couple of committees. So maybe they get, say, $200,000 a year. But if they're living in, for example, Sydney or the big cities or the nice areas of the big cities, then they need 5 times that amount if they're going to have live in nice tree-lined streets with security gates and all those sorts of things, and if they're going to send their kids to the fancy universities and so on. So that they need far more than $200,000 a year. So the only way they can make that is through property speculation, and so that's what they do. Or again, getting sleazy share allocations. But this means now that the political class is completely dependent on the financial class to deliver these sort of returns and this sort of income, and their lifestyle now is completely reliant. There's no reliant on the income from now. Consider yourself. If you had 90% of your income came from one source and 10% from the other, you would tend to gravitate. Your sympathies would lie with where the bulk of the money's coming from, the bulk of your income's coming from, and which is why you'd be very cozy in bed with the financial class of people. So the political elite, given that again the majority of their income now comes from property speculation that is aided and abetted and assisted and under the tables by offshore money, the big financial institutions and so on, property developers, then that's creating an alliance there. And that's where the loyalties, if you like, lie of the political class, because their parliamentary salary isn't worth dog shit to them anymore. It's just nothing. It's nowhere near enough to live the lifestyle they want to live and think they're entitled to live. And if you've ever been in a situation, I've come across people like this where you've had money and then you've lost it, or had a lot less, then it's a much tougher gig to get by. It's an unpleasant experience for any of those who've experienced it. So this is where things have gone, and this is where politicians now get most of their income, and again where their loyalties now lie. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.